The Sandman Volume 1, 24 Hours, review by Nicholas Amina, author Neil Gaiman. Illustrations, Sam Keat, Mike Derengenberg, Malcolm Jones, introduced by Patrick Rothfuss. 24 Hours. Act 1, 24-hour diner, following the waitress Betty Monroe as she cheerfully serves the diner visitors while reveling on a secret that she is a novelist who writes happy stories about the diner visitors. Happy, unrealistic stories about them all having happy endings and glorified timelines and marrying the opposite sex as is proper by her standard. Neil Gaiman, with each panel work, does not follow the traditional Z pattern style of lettering, but you can see elements of the Z pattern when moving with Betty across each panel. As you follow Betty's movements across panels, Betty acts as a Z pattern, allowing readers to follow lettering marks in her journey across the diner. Each character in the diner is introduced through Betty's acquaintance of them. As the final diner visitor named Marsh is introduced by Betty as a man in which she is frequent to take care of after the death of his wife, the irregular lettering style stops as Betty is not shown in the next few panels. We regain a regular Z pattern style of lettering as we see a sinister force in the corner, different and foreign from the other patrons in the diner, yet somehow unnoticed and uninfluenced by Betty. Dr. D sits in a corner and activates the crystal of the Sandman that he has stolen. Act 2 begins as Dr. D has his first interaction with Betty, telling her to turn on the television. It's turned to a kid show in which a puppeteer suddenly becomes mad and is whispered to by his puppet. Then he's whispered to do is to slit his wrist. As he proceeds to do so and tell children audiences to follow along, the puppet watches in glee and Dr. D laughs. Meanwhile, 6th hour, none of the patrons of the diners have left. They cannot leave. They do not know why. Neil Gaiman follows a 9-panel style with his lettering as he depicts the transition of time. Pandemonium. As the patrons are trapped, the city turns into a scene of murder, suicide, and madness. And then the panel letterings begin to follow Dr. D as he walks through the diner and its patrons who are in a dreamlike stupor of grandeur, like he is rewriting the story Betty told of the patrons originally, while allowing them to enact it. Act 3. Neil Gaiman narrates that it begins with conflict and character reveals. As the patrons turn on one another, Neil Gaiman counts down each hour as the scene in the diner becomes more increasingly chaotic. His story doesn't follow a Z pattern, but a panel style, each panel a scene. The characters begin experiencing their deepest secrets, including one in which a woman confesses to sleeping with a dead body, bludgeoned by a hammer. The paneling becomes creative as we flash through scenes of increasing pandemonium and debauchery, and as Dr. D begins to play with the patrons, getting a sick thrill from misery and homicidal madness. In a certain panel, Dr. D is shown disrobing, and a later panel redressing, suggesting a sexual nature to his thrills. In panels, the patrons are shown to be switching from moments of euphoria, murder, bestial instinct, torture, self-mutilation, and euphoria once again. Hour 22. In the aftermath of it all, Dr. D is the only one standing, the decapitated head of Betty, the waitress, at his feet, as if to punish her for telling happy stories, and a gruesome scene. He stands nonchalantly in his trench coat. Hour 23. He eats a fly that moves across 6 panels. Hour 24. All too late. The protagonist arrives. A figure appears in the doorway. Dr. D has grown weary of waiting. He calls the figure weak, but we see the face of the figure that is the Sandman. its pupils pinpoint and focused on the madman, Dr. D. With the cadence of 24 hours, Neil Gaiman tells a masterful story of madness and eventual tragedy. He starts with patrons who are innocent at the beginning, and then in the end, they have killed each other through madness and through their own wickedness. This is a story in which you can learn from on how to panel and letter, because it shows each transition of scene through act structures in a sound beat of 24 hours.